'cause I see the born of no return. Sister, hey now, can't you see we're rushing for the end? I see the point of no return. Now see the point of no return. It's just here.
Big, thick one. Well, good evening. You're tuned in to Wide Awake News on the Rents Radio Network. And yeah, this will be my last session to bark at the moon for 2013. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm just as happy to see 2013 over and done with. Of course, it does give you a moment's pause as to what we might have to look forward to in 2014. You know, I was going to do a segment tonight on what I thought were the most underreported news items for 2013. I thought about it a lot, and you know, I looked up a number of articles and considered what other journalists had posted as their top picks. And of course, you know, you can see a spin on most every one of these, you know, lists of the top 10 that you look at. You know, one guy is obviously very progressive, and he says, you know, one of the top 10 is the way the poor illegal aliens are treated as they're sneaking across the border, you know. And, you know, okay, you know, I guess he's entitled to his opinion. You look at another one, and, you know, they're obviously, you know, raving on the other side of the fence. You know, and I looked at that and I said, you know, my opinion of the most underreported items for 2013, and $5 will get you a cup of foofy coffee at that expensive yuppie coffee place whose name I will not mention because I refuse to give those guys a plug. So I just had to, you know, belly up to the bar and check the current items that are being reported, decide which of those I thought was most relevant to discuss tonight. I think I've mentioned more than once that I'm kind of an old geezer, and I remember when Jimmy Carter was president. And I remember when a whole bunch of embassy staff was taken hostage in Iran, and, you know, we had this, you know, staring match going on with the Iranians. And at the time, like most folks, you know, I honestly believed that the reporting that was coming down the wire and posted on my television set was true, accurate journalism to the best of their abilities. And one TV show kind of stood out during that period in time, a CBS production called 60 Minutes. Man, I tell you, I was an avid watcher of 60 Minutes. You know, you just could not pry me away from the remote control when that show was on, because, you know, they started out covering this hostage crisis that was going on in Iran and went on for, you know, a little more than a year, if I remember correctly. You know, then there was the October surprise, where some kind of a deal for drugs and hostages and guns and Ollie North and Reagan and that whole scenario was so confusing. I'm not even sure what side's up on that one. But obviously some deal was made, and when Mr. Reagan was getting ready to be inaugurated, the hostages came home from Iran. We have no idea for sure what all the backroom deals were, but, you know, if it quacks like a duck, has webbed feet, there's a pretty good chance it's a duck, and a lot about that particular one gave one a moment's pause. Well, just recently, that 60 Minutes program that I used to trust, man, I used to think, okay, these guys are hardball reporters. They're doing their best to give me the truth. I knew every once in a while they went a little bit off the reservation. You know, that's the price of being a journalist. You know, you report it the best you can. Sometimes you get it right. Sometimes you get it wrong. When you get it wrong, you try to post a retraction and say, oops. But, you know, critics of the media of late have pointed to so many of these broadcasts as just being apologists for the government. It's like, you know, the Ministry of Truth from 1984. Some of you out there may have read that novel. You know, they used to, you know, the protagonist in that particular piece was working for the Ministry of Truth, basically rewriting history to suit the currently politically correct trends. Well, just recently, 60 Minutes produced what was everybody hoped was going to be a hard-hitting piece on all this NSA spying that been big in the news here recently. And the fellow in the picture over my shoulder, for those watching the video feed on this, a fellow by the name of John Miller. Now, Miller comes from the security industrial complex side of things. But, you know, in this capacity, he was operating as a journalist for 60 Minutes. And you would think that somebody, you know, coming from a position, kind of an insider position, you know, he would know the right questions to ask. And being a journalist, he'd get to the bottom of it. Tell the American people the truth about what the hell was going on with that. Instead, he did nothing but throw them softballs and was basically an apologist for the NSA. And a lot of people have called him down on it. Deservedly so. 60 Minutes, CBS, John Miller, shame on you. That wasn't journalism. Just being a government propagandist. And of course, Mr. Miller, as a pat on the back for getting out there and telling the American people what the government wanted him to tell them, has been hooked up with a really primo position now with the New York Police Department. He's going to head up their anti-terrorism group, you know, so congratulations, Mr. Miller. Just shows to go you. If you say what you're paid to say, the rewards can be substantial. Another good reason to always consider the news that's presented to you and make up your own damn mind. Because quite often, there is a spin, and more than likely these days, it's the politically correct government spin. Y'all been keeping up with what's been going on here recently in Russia? You know, of course, you know, we've got terrorism under control here. You know, I don't know if it's because we you know, paid off the right folks, or if, you know, there just wasn't any real terrorism in the first. I don't know. But, you know, Russia, just within, you know, short order, had two really severe terrorist bombings. And this is coming up, right as Russia's getting ready to host the Olympics starting in February. It's kind of scary, got a lot of people concerned, but what's not typically reported in the media is the fact that Saudi Prince Bandar bin Sultan back in August, put on your thinking caps, people, remember back, the problem is, typical Americans, we have very short attention spans. You probably heard this reported briefly in the news, might have been put out there once, but nobody seems to be making the connection. But Saudi Prince Bandar bin Sultan, back in August, warned Vladimir Putin that if he continued supporting the Assad regime in Syria, there would be hell to pay in the form of some of them there Chechnyan rebels that been given Russia fits in recent years. Everybody's kind of put that aside, but when you stop and think about it, Russia Today's got an article on this. There's an outfit, economicpolicyjournal.com, that's published an article about this. You're not going to find much of it in what passes for your mainstream media. But, there are some folks out there with a little bit longer attention span who have connected the dots, and this could very well be a tit for tat where Russia is being punished for not towing the New World Order line. It's always hard to say definitively, do I believe this to be 100% for sure in the bag? No. The articles that I read, the articles that I've discussed, these are editorials. They're people's opinions. They've looked at the events, they've looked at what led up to the events, and they've connected the dots, and they said, this might just be what it's all about. I'm afraid, as with all things, you'll have to consider the evidence available and make up your own damn mind. I say that a lot, don't I? But, that's what's missing in a lot of discourse here in the United States anymore. Heard somebody the other day say, well, I'm a Democrat because I'm not in favor of persecuting gay people. Huh? As if there are no gay Republicans? It's that kind of narrow-mindedness that's made a trap for so many of us. We identify with one group or another based on one issue that we consider important to us, regardless of what that issue might be. There's people out there who don't like the idea of abortion. So they immediately gravitate towards the Republican political party based on this one issue. There are people out there who feel that we should treat people who are out of work and people who are on welfare and people who are maybe on Social Security and veterans, we should treat them better than we're treating now. So they immediately identify with the Democrats based on take your pick of what issue. They really think that there's some substantial difference between these two parties, when in fact, regardless of whether there's Democrats or Republicans in, neither one is really going to change people's hearts about something like abortion or something like gay rights. And, you know, as far as some of these social programs go, doesn't seem to matter whether there's a Democrat or Republican in. In recent memory, the rich have gotten richer and the poor have gotten poorer. On the real issues where government should indeed have some impact, in most cases, Republicans, Democrats, doesn't seem to make any difference. You get screwed. Okay? So, you know, as you decide your political leanings, you might want to take more of a look at the individual who's running, his background or her background, rather than what their party affiliation might be. Started out this program talking about underreported items for 2013. There were a bunch of them. I mean, how much have you heard about that thing where the IRS was being used by those currently in authority to punish nonprofits who might not agree with their policies? How many of you, put your hands up now, how many of you remember that story? Okay? This is how short an attention span people have. Yes, I mean, they were caught red-handed. You know, I think Nixon got in trouble for having one IRS tax report on one individual, you know, and the Clintons had hundreds of them, and, you know, they got, you know, nowadays it's not just common, but out in the open, out in your face, that those currently in charge will use the IRS and the tax code to punish those who they don't like. How much reporting did you hear about that on your TV news? How much of that did you see written about in your local newspapers? Did you see much about that? Well, there was another issue. Stunk to high heaven. Remember a little thing called Benghazi? Remember Muammar Gaddafi was our best buddy in the Mediterranean. You know, he was part of the team. He was, you know, gonna give up all of his weapons of mass destruction, and he was going to come out against terrorism, and he was getting on board. He was on our side. He was selling a lot of natural gas and oil to Italy and making deals with folks. You know, hey, he was a member of the team, right? Well, then he decided that he was going to try to unite a big chunk of Africa under, you know, kind of a European common union type thing, and they were going to have a gold-backed currency, and they were going to stop selling their oil for dollars and instead use what they called a gold dinar. You remember that? And for some reason, all of a sudden, Muammar Gaddafi became, you know, the devil. He had horns and a tail, and he was just awful. And he was suppressing his people and being a bad guy. And we had to go in and bomb the living daylights out of Libya, basically, you know, blow an up and coming nation back into the Stone Age. Make sure that Gaddafi got out of there, and make sure that they put up a central bank and went back on a fiat currency and only traded their goods for oil. And once that all settled down, well, they still had a whole bunch of weapons that were provided to them by well, certainly not by the U.S., but by agents closely tied to the U.S. And what happened? We sent some CIA boys over there to try and collect up all those weapons and send them over to Syria, where the next target of opportunity was going to be. Remember that? Remember that? Do you remember the results? Do you remember who the players were? Do you remember much of anything? about what went down in Benghazi? Coming up on a break here pretty soon, so I think I'm going to save the punchline on this one until we get back. But that was without a doubt one of the most underreported news items for 2013. It just absolutely blows me away that no investigative reporters really got to the bottom of that. I remember they kind of backed off a little bit because Hillary Clinton was, Secretary of State, and she was not feeling well. I don't know, some kind of a instant flu or something, and she couldn't really be called on the carpet to explain what the heck was going on. Yep. We'll finish that one up when we get back from this break. Please do stand by. We're going to try to sell some merchandise to keep the lights burning at the networks, and we'll be back right after. Well, just before the break, I was setting up my argument on Benghazi. And I've got to tell you that, this time around, I've got to give credit where credit is due. This report is from the Sunday New York Times. The New York Times, I'll be darned. A lengthy front-page report in Sunday's New York Times provides additional confirmation that the attack on the U.S. facility in Benghazi, Libya, in September of 2012 was the outcome of the Obama administration's use of Islamic fundamentalist terrorists in its war against the Libyan regime of Muammar Gaddafi. How about that? The Times article, based on dozens of interviews in Benghazi, asserts the attack that killed 4 Americans, including U.S. ambassador, still calling him an ambassador. I thought he was a CIA chief, but that's neither here nor there. U.S. Ambassador Christopher Stevens was carried out by Libyans who had previously been allied with the U.S. government in the 2011 war that overthrew and murdered Gaddafi. The interesting thing about this, the thing that you have to remember, is that there was a lot of backroom dealing going on here. Okay? We had our reasons for wanting Muammar to be out. I mean, frankly, just any government who thumbs its nose at accepting the all-important U.S. petrodollar for their oil, it's a matter of national security. We can't have them out there, acting like it was a free market, for crying out loud. No. Oh, no. No. If you're going to sell oil in the world stage, must be for dollars. I mean, just ask Saddam Hussein. I mean, thou shalt not sell oil for anything other than the U.S. dollar. That way, the Fed Reserve and all of its member banks get their little piece of the action. They get their little vigorish. They get their little piece. So, under those circumstances, because it was such a matter of national security that Muammar Gaddafi and his rogue regime that might sell the resources of their nation for something other than dollars, anybody who would go up against that regime was our friend. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Well, Muammar had made himself an enemy of the United States. Therefore, anybody who would go against him was our buddy. And man, I'll tell you what, we got in bed with some dirty dogs over that one. Part of the deal was, these anti-Gaddafi guys got some pretty potent U.S. weaponry. Well, once all the fighting was done, they didn't need all those big guns anymore. I mean, Gaddafi was gone. Things are settled down. Our new puppet, our approved leader, a democratically elected leadership was now in charge of Libya, and everything's settling down. They don't need those big guns anymore. So, some of our CIA boys went over there and tried to buy all that stuff back so that we could move them to the next hot spot on the list, which happened to be Syria. It was all a CIA operation. I mean, they had every right to believe that these guys who they had basically backed going against Libya would be agreeable. Throw some of those pretty pictures of dead U.S. presidents on the table. They shouldn't have any problem with giving up all those big guns that we'd provided them to take Gaddafi down. And seeing as how those weapons were already kind of off the books, didn't have any serial numbers or anything could be traced, it'd be very convenient if those wound up where we needed them next, which is Syria. Well, it seems that these fellas were basically agreeable. I mean, they were talking like they wanted McDonald's and KFC, and they wanted close relations with the U.S. But at the last minute, some groups took exception, decided, no, we don't think we're going to go for that. And basically it was an operation that went bad. It was a CIA operation that went bad. Now, one thing the government never wants to admit is that they might have made a mistake. Ooh, that would be bad. That would be bad. I mean, the government wants to make sure that everybody knows that they are in control, 100% in control. So Hillary Clinton could not come out as the head of the Department of State. I mean, frankly, this was her baby. It was her problem. I mean, if the buck stops anywhere, it stops at Hillary Clinton. She couldn't come out and say, oops, we screwed up. We picked the wrong guys as our allies, and they stabbed us in the back. They couldn't fess up because they'd have had to fess up to giving these guys the weapons in the first place. They'd have to, a whole litany, a whole cascade of stinky stuff would have come out. Kind of like, trading weapons and drugs and hostages and, the circular trades that went on back during the October surprise. So Hillary did not want to go to Capitol Hill and explain this situation. So, she was conveniently ill. And when she finally recovered from her momentary illness, her reaction was a very angry statement. What difference does it make now? That's basically what she told the American people. I mean, it's all over with now. That's yesterday's news. That happened a month ago, 6 weeks ago. The truth is just now starting to come out on an incident that happened back in 2011, was almost entirely, happened in 2012. Benghazi happened in 2012. It's a story that really should have been investigated thoroughly and reported during 2013. We are just now starting to get little bitty insights into what the real deal was. But got to congratulate the New York Times for finally publishing something approaching reality. This next article, chances are I'm going to make some of you guys mad about this one. We'll just have to see. How many of you out there in your heart honestly believe that the United States never landed astronauts on the moon. Okay? Now, from what I understand, there are a good number of people out there who really believe that, all the moon landings were shot on a sound stage. It was all done with the special effects of the day. And, I guess they're entitled to their opinion. We'll get back to this one right after these commercial announcements. This will be our last break for the evening, but we do have to sell some product here to keep the lights burning. Back in a minute. All right, that was our last break for the evening. I hope everybody bought a few items so that there's no issue with keeping the lights and everything burning over at the studio. Just before the break, I posed the question, were the Apollo landings on the moon a hoax? There's a lot of people out there who believe they were. Okay? Up until very recently, there was a Flat Earth Society. So, people are entitled to their opinions. Now, I would have thought that the hoax theorists would have kind of put it to bed when the lunar mapping project in 2011, which had cameras that had a high enough resolution to where they could actually spot the man-made artifacts on the surface of the moon. When photographs were released from that thing, I kind of thought that maybe the hoax theorists would have put it to bed, kind of like the Flat Earth Society did. But no, there's still a lot of people out there absolutely convinced that U.S. astronauts never landed on the moon. Now, personally, I think it's a foregone conclusion. The evidence is absolutely conclusive. The 1969 launch, verdict is still out on that one. The problem is we get so caught up in all the real BS that's floating around out there, all the obvious conspiracy theories, that we see conspiracies in everything. It's like, checking under the bed every night, make sure Osama bin Laden's not hiding under there. I know he's been dead since 2001 or whatever. Matter of fact, that man's had more lives than a cat. So, but I still check under my bed for Osama bin Laden because I just know he's hiding under there. And I suspect there's always going to be people who are going to honestly believe that the sun orbits the earth, that the earth is flat, and that mankind has never visited the moon. Well, a little bit ago, the Chinese put a rover down. It's up there right now, supposedly collecting science. Now, I've got to admit that, the Chinese could certainly be a little bit more forthcoming about their mission. I mean, supposedly this little rover that they've put up there is a very sophisticated little gadget. And you'd have thought that by now we'd have had some really sharp, crystal clear images of the lunar surface, better than what we've had in a long, long time. But, the Chinese have been a little slow about sharing their data with the world, and that tends to heighten speculation. Oh, well, they're not being forthcoming, therefore, by definition, it's got to be a fake. It's got to be another hoax. And yeah, just like with the Apollo landings, there's a lot of folks out there that are very suspicious of the Chinese reports about having landed a rover on the moon. And some skepticism is justified. I mean, apparently they did publish some very well scripted video of a recent spacewalk where you could kind of see air bubbles floating around in the image. Some say it was a defect in the photography. Some say it was lens flare. Others have looked at it and say, "No, I'm sorry. This was filmed underwater. Those were bubbles floating through the frame." To be honest with you, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if quite a few of the images that NASA released to us were doctored a little bit to make it propaganda worthy. I mean, obviously, NASA knows where its funding's coming from, and yeah, they're gonna toe the line if they're told, well, maybe you could, make the stars and bars just a little brighter, make them stand out a little bit better. They go, okay, if it means another $1 million on the budget, we'll do what we have to do. Doesn't surprise me. Now, a lot has been made of evidence regarding shadows and this, that, and the other thing. So I pulled this image up. You'll notice the two shadows, the one from the tree in the background and the one from the tree in the foreground, tend to come together and intersect. Well, I can assure you that this is an amateur photograph of a landscape that's lit by the sun, and this is an optical illusion. These converging shadows are an optical illusion based on topography. I mean, things like this happen. Now, is there a possibility that the Chinese have faked their lunar lander? Look, these days anything's possible. Okay? You do have to look at most everything with a skeptical eye. But really now, yes, in the 1960s and 1970s, the United States did indeed possess the technological prowess to put men on the moon. And the Russians also had the technological prowess to do it. They were about 4 or 5 years behind the United States in what at the time was termed the space race. It was a matter of national pride to see whether the United States or Russia would be the first to land men on the moon. Believe me, if the Russians got wind of the fact that the United States had faked the moon landing, if nothing else, they would have sent a robot probe to where the U.S. was claiming to have landed and had it do a little sightseeing tour, and they would have published the photographs worldwide saying, haha, they lied. No, there was too much competition involved. The United States happened to win that particular race. We did indeed land men on the moon, and I think it's highly likely that the Chinese right now have a rover on the moon that's basically patterned after the U.S. probes that we landed on Mars. But, as with all things, you're just going to have to consider the available evidence and make up your own damn mind. I do not claim to be the authority on this issue. I can tell you that I've considered all the arguments. Yep, I believe that Americans walked on the face of the moon. And yeah, I think there's really a Chinese rover up there, and hopefully at some point we'll get some interesting science out of their endeavor. That would be my hope. Well, I've got a little bit of time left, so one of the things that I haven't done in a while is quick and dirty movie reviews. Now, please understand, when I sit down to waste some time watching a movie, this highbrow stuff that is going to be attractive to some film critics is probably not what I've got in mind. I mean, frankly, when I enjoy a movie, I just want to be entertained. I'm looking for some escapism. I'm looking for some thrills. I'm looking for some action, some adventure. Yeah. I know, ladies. I'm going to watch a guy flick. And as a rule, I rather like the science fiction genre. So a lot of the movies I tend to gravitate towards are science fiction in nature. And one came out recently that's based on a book I remember reading as a youngster. A movie called Ender's Game. Now, frankly, as sci-fi thrillers goes, this one's got it. You know, I'm not gonna rank it up against, you know, the Blue Guys, you know, that one. I forget what the name of the movie was. It was done by that fellow who did the Lord of the Ring trilogies. It was that was a really good one. I don't think Ender's Game is really in that class, but the storyline, if you did indeed read the book, the storyline is pretty much true to the book. It's a compelling story. It has some interesting characters. And yeah, for you guys out there, there's a lot of rock'em sock'em action in it. So yeah, if you got the time, that one's worth seeing. Now obviously, you know, I'm kind of a sci-fi fantasy freak. I love that genre of movies. I read Tolkien's books back when I was in high school, I believe. And yeah, the latest episode of the Tolkien books that's out in movie form is The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug. It's a great movie. True to the book? No, they take some poetic license with the storyline. But, you know, it's entertaining. Again, there's a lot of rock'em sock'em action, so guys, you're going to love it. Strangely enough, my wife truly enjoyed the movie. She got a kick out of it too, so apparently there's enough good-looking hunks in it to give the ladies a little bit of eye candy. So I think this is one you could probably sit down with your wife and or girlfriend, have a look-see, and you probably enjoy. Good movie. Definitely worth the time to see. All right, moving right along. One that was panned by the critics. Everybody hated this movie. And I'm going to have to fall in line with them. Riddick. Don't waste your time. Okay? The first dose of Riddick we got was okay. It was kind of a novel storyline. It was a little different. All right. Now that we're into our third episode of Riddick, I'm sorry. It's just gratuitous violence. Very little to recommend this movie. Even though it's a sci-fi genre that I usually like, I'm going to recommend you not waste your time on Riddick. But another one that the critics seem to really pan, a movie called Gravity, has George Clooney and what's her name? Sandra Bullock, actors that I'm not particularly fond of. Story's got interesting special effects, a lot of action. They keep you guessing right up until the end whether or not the protagonist's going to survive. Worth sitting down to watch. You'll like it. Hey, that's it. I'm finished barking at the moon tonight. I hope you enjoyed the program. Hope you had a great year in 2013. Hope you have a better one in 2014. But keep that critical thinking going. We'll see you next week. Good night, all.
Calling out to you, won't you turn around? Oh, I'm calling out to you. turn, turn, won't you turn around? Oh, the point of no return is just ahead now.